A study revealed today that the UK coalition government, in its welfare and tax policies over the last 5 years, has contributed to transferring money from the poorest half of the country to its richest. It's also added that these changes have actually not resulted in reducing the deficit. Yusra Makdi has more.
With the UK general elections looming, a landmark academic study released today reveals outcomes of tax and welfare policies over the last 5 years. It found that welfare cuts under the coalition government of Prime Minister David Cameron have actually shifted money from the poor to the pockets of those better off. The study, published by British daily The Observer, comes as a blow to UK Chancellor George Osborne's claim that the burden of austerity has fallen on everyone equally. The report says it is clear that their changes did not lead to uniform changes in people's incomes. The reforms had the effect of making an income transfer from the poorer half of households to most of the richer half, with no net effect on the public finances. Single-parent families, large families, and those with children who make up the poorest 5% of the country were hardest hit. The opposition Labour Party were quick to respond to these revelations. Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls criticised the Conservatives for their claims and vowed, "Ed Miliband and I are determined that Labour's economic plan will deliver a recovery for the many, not just a few. And our plan to balance the books in a fairer way will start by reversing David Cameron's tax cut for the top 1% of earners." However, analysts say that while parties might criticize each other for failed policies, they more or less use the same rhetoric.
When it comes to policies, I do think that there is a very distinct line as to how and what priorities one party will give and what priorities another party will give, because that is historic. That is what has always divided the two parties and has caused one party to go into power and then another party to come back into power, because sadly we don't have a party that covers all bases. There are certain priorities. I mean, Labour has always been one for the common man, to bring in social welfare reforms or initiate form. But there are certain things you can't do depending on the economic climate.
Ahead of general elections, political parties are careful in choosing the right words to lure in the voters. But amid concerns over the deficit reduction, tough decisions on welfare will clearly hit the most vulnerable groups more than others.
Joining us over the phone is campaigner for social justice, Darren Carnegi. Darren, thank you for joining us today. Now, taking from the poor and giving to the rich, in a nutshell, that's what the coalition government is doing, isn't it?
I think what the coalition government are doing is the complete opposite of Robin Hood, and they're actually taking from the poor to give to the rich. I believe that the welfare cuts are nothing but a savage attack on the most vulnerable people in society.
The report, as you've said, mentions those vulnerable people and says that they are the most effective, as you have said. Now, I'm understanding that you're a member of Food Bank. Can you tell us whether there has been an increase in demands in these services during the term of this government?
Well, I run an organisation called Glasgow's Needy. People call it a food bank. I prefer to call it a food share, because I believe banks are part of the problem as well that create the need for them. The rise in demand for people having to go to food banks is absolutely it's catastrophic. Day in, day out, I'm seeing people from all walks of life having to come to me for food. In Glasgow, in Scotland, England, anywhere, 2014, the fact that families are having to go somewhere for food is absolutely disgusting and doesn't make sense to me.
Do you feel that there has been a rise in the last few years, or do you think this is something that has always been there?
I think it's getting worse. I think since the Tory government, it's getting a lot worse. I don't believe that Labour are the cure either. I don't believe Labour are a party of the people.
As you've mentioned that it's got worse during the Conservative government, yes, Labour have vowed to do things differently, but the report suggests that both parties used different tactics but to the same end. So who is there that will be there for that 5% of the population? Who serves them?
I believe we have to completely change the way society runs politically. I don't believe party politics. I believe we have to change this whole system of party politics. I mean, it doesn't matter who's standing. It could be Fred West, but because he's standing under a Labour banner, you'll vote for him. For me, that doesn't make sense. We have to get real radicals from the communities, people who are fighting for their people, but actually they're fighting for themselves because they're a member of the community. I believe the problem lies at the top, that it can be changed from the grassroots level. We're getting your average Joe Blogs, your man in the street, interested in social issues and getting their voice back. And I believe they are starting to get their voice back. I believe the people are on the move, and they're moving quick.
But, I mean, as far as party politics are concerned, that's not realistic for them to change in the next 6 months before the next general election. What do you think either party will do for the economically vulnerable?
I believe that I don't really know what they'll do. I know what they'll say they'll do. What they always do is 6 months before a general election, they'll give you all the promises under the sun, and then 6 months after the general election's been done, they start backtracking on their words. I mean, in the UK as a whole, I don't have the answers on who to vote for. That's why I wanted an independent Scotland. I believe independence for Scotland would have been the first and biggest step towards social justice, for not just for Scotland, but the whole of the UK. Because I believe under an independent Scotland, we would have been able to have more radicals get into Parliament. I believe the workers and the working classes of England would have looked up and seen what happened, and they would have rose up and done the same.
Darren Carnegi, campaigner for social justice, thank you very much for joining us today.